candidates from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Oh, the state of politics today, getting closer and closer to the final days, to the election. And I pointed out many of times, I'm not focused too heavily on the presidential debate when it comes to, do I think it will make a big difference for freedom, for liberty? I just don't see it being a position that's going to be filled with anybody that truly believes in individual liberty and has somewhat of a respect of the Constitution and the meaning behind each amendment in the Bill of Rights. And again, you know, the Bill of Rights being conducive to individual freedom and liberty without it necessarily being a libertarian document. It's inspired by libertarian views, but it is not full libertarian, of course, because the Constitution allows for a government which is not conclusive to full-on pure libertarian philosophy. But we look at where we're at now and where the founders were after the revolution, and even before and during the revolution. There was, I believe, a soul searching among a lot of men at the time that were looking at, what allows for a society to prosper and what must you have in the state of the world at the time, too. I think that's why, you're not going to see anybody arguing for full libertarian, even though there were some arguments for a lot more libertarian outlook for the country. But it's one of those things, too, that look at where we're at now. The Constitution seems, miles and miles away. It's just we're so far away from individual liberty, and we're on the path to even more, that I believe if you're libertarian, you have to go, let's at least get to the constitutional point. And then we can expand upon that to even make a freer society. But again, society has to also be on that path for that to happen. Um, because we all know that government, even if you instituted a government that was more constitutional, if society is not on that tracks, it's not going to help anything. And society tends to dictate how the government reacts rather than vice versa. Um, it's one of those things that society has to get on that path, and government has no choice but to go along. Um, you know, Larkin Rose, the Tiny Dot, go check it out. But we I think have to start looking at all the other offices and to make sure we get the most libertarian and constitutional people into those positions so that even if we were to get some type of tyrannical um, president, whether it be Hillary Trump or someone else, um, that we have people within Congress, within state governments, within the judicial system that not only understand the Constitution, but are willing to um, hold others to that same standard along with themselves. And that kind of brings me to this Ron Paul Liberty report, Liberty in the House with the U.S. Representative John Massey, and they discussed, the what's going on um, in the government when it comes to the liberty and freedom movement. And this was an interesting interview, so I do want to go ahead and get this kicked off. Um, I know we haven't been having problems. I hope not. I haven't had any word about any problems, so the audio should play. So let's go ahead and kick this off. Okay, we're having a little bit of issue here. Give me a second. Now it should be playing.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today as co-host is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, nice to see you here today.
It's good to have you back in Texas, sir.
Oh, it's good to be back. I'm glad you kept things going. I better be careful or I'll get fired if I leave and miss too often. But we have a very special guest today, and many of our viewers already know him because he was so kind as to come to our conference in Alexandria. He was fantastic. We have to be careful or he will be stealing our show. But we're really pleased that he's with us. That's Thomas Massey, 4th District in Kentucky. Thomas, great to have you with us today.
Well, great to be with you, Ron. And I've got one of the best senators in the world in Kentucky. I'm speaking of your son.
lost audio. Give me a second, and I'll pull it up on another device here. And I don't understand. It does seem like the audio is actually being drowned out by something, but I have absolutely nothing turned up when I have that audio playing, so it should just be playing fine. But give me a second, I will get this other device going too. We'll go ahead and kind of talk about where we are in the liberty movement as I see it as in society. Okay, sorry about that. Trying to get our device plugged in. Now, where I see the liberty movement in society, I really think it's been in a way sidelined, perverted maybe. When I see so-called freedom lovers, Tea Partyists, so-called libertarians, and they're going, we need Trump. We need Trump. We can't have Hillary. And I cannot agree. I don't think that we need Hillary. I don't think we need Trump. But I don't see a better choice. I just see a different choice. And let me explain that. With Hillary, we know what we're going to get. And we're not going to like it. Okay. Well, people go, well, exactly. That's why we need Trump. This is why we should vote for Trump. And I can't exactly agree because Trump, I think, is kind of, in a way, playing the role of the unknown danger. Now, I could be wrong. Again, I've said this many of times. I can be wrong. He can turn out to be an awesome president. But I also have to look at what he's called for. And calling for people to be censored for, in a lot of sense, he talks about, opposition, people that talk bad about him. And he doesn't necessarily go people that lie about him, mainly people that talk about him. So freedom of speech and freedom of press kind of worry me there. And then, of course, we all talk about, can your cell phone be looked at and all this. We've talked about the stop and frisk in New York and having that finally supposedly, stopped, that they're no longer doing it. And there's a reason. You can't just stop people and search them for no reason. You can't just pull over, say, get up against the wall and search them for no reason. But they have been doing this. It's not like they're getting a call, this person wearing this type of clothing, walking this direction, and you just, tended to meet that criteria, and even then, if you're not doing anything, you're really not required. But we see the state of the police state right now, and we have people go, well, if it's a cop, you gotta do. Well, that's part of the problem. As long as you're subservient to someone just because they have a badge, whether they're doing right or wrong, when we see a judicial system that does not usually go against these people, even when there's quite a bit of evidence that shows that they were in the wrong, you can't really defend that. Again, two wrongs don't make a right. And that's kind of where we were at in the presidential debate. Which wrong is going to make a right? I just don't see it happening. And to go, well, I know her evil, so I'll take the unknown evil or possible unknown evil. We know he said things that go against freedom, go against, the Constitution and liberty. It just, and what is the truth? What does he truly believe? What is the truth of what he will do? It's unknown. So we're going, we know this one, we don't know this one, we'll go for the one we don't know. Because at least there's a chance. Well, if I see something that, or hear something that goes against my beliefs, I can't vote for that. And that goes locally, when there is someone that stands for it, vote. But when no one's standing for what you believe in, what you hold, dear to you, your core beliefs, when they go against that, I think it's a responsibility for you to go with your principle, go with your belief, go with your heart, and not just pick someone to be the lesser of two evils. Good luck voting for the lesser of two evils. We'll see how that evil works out for you. You've seen that quote and variations of that quote on the internet before. It rings true. Okay, I got my other machine plugged in. Just getting it fired up right now. We'll get that clip going. Now, when you look at your local government, your local elected officials, I've said this for many years. Always take the hardest look at your county sheriff. If you're in the city limits, you really should start looking at libertarian mayors. Because cities are really, really one of the more corrupt places, and if you could get even a constitutional Republican or even Democrat, if you have someone running as a Democrat that is a true libertarian constitutional type person, that's a direction that you should look at. But again, I don't care what party or independent, it's what do you stand for? What do you believe in? And how many people out there that are going to vote go, this represents me? Even if we disagree on, maybe how to proceed with our beliefs, we have core beliefs. Individual freedom, right to self-defense, right to, your privacy, right to free speech, the core beliefs that libertarians, constitutionalists, both sides believe in. These are natural rights. So I think that we've focused on the lesser of two evils in the two-party system. And not only are you leaving the third parties out, you're leaving the independents out. Let's start looking at the individuals running for these offices. And find the ones that aren't looking for a position of power. Look for the ones that are saying this position should not yield us power. We have to, finally put an end to this. I think it can happen. I think it can at a local level more than anything. These are the things that we will have to start doing. If we don't do it at the local level, then it will matter who becomes president, who gets elected to Congress. Because if your local communities can't agree on individual rights, individual freedoms, property rights, all of this, then you will become a slave to the Fed, the federal government. It will happen. Now, when you have a state, local government that's willing to say, nah, you're just going to have to kind of butt off. The federal government, other than the military, which is spread out throughout the world, that's a whole nother issue on this. But as you look at the federal government, again, go watch Larkin Rose's Tiny Dot. The federal government is not that big. If you take all local governments and combine them, even portions of the federal government or the local governments, just, take half of the country or even maybe a quarter of the country and combine all those, you're going to start seeing the numbers and what they really look like. So when you start having multiple states legalize marijuana, that when California loosened all of its rules and regulations on marijuana and laws, the feds harassed the hell out of them. But when other states started doing even more, it became a point where the feds can't really, where do you go from there? You're wasting money. They're not going to recoup as much money as they're going to have to waste. Therefore, it's not feasible. And now they have to reassess how they want to go after this, which them not rescheduling marijuana kind of makes me worried that they're hoping that maybe they can get enough states to get rid of it to make it harder for other states to legalize it in some form, and then make it easier for them to harass the states that are left. But we'll see. I do have that clip now. Ron Paul Liberty Report, Liberty in the House with the U.S. Representative Thomas Massey pulled up. And I also have another device that I will be able to listen to make sure it is coming in. So let's go ahead and cue this up.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today as co-host is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, nice to see you here today.
It's good to have you back in Texas, sir.
Oh, it's good to be back. I'm glad you kept things going. I better be careful or I'll get fired if I leave and miss too often. But we have a very special guest today, and many of our viewers already know him because he was so kind as to come to our conference in Alexandria. He was fantastic. We have to be careful or he will be stealing our show, but we're really pleased that he's with us. That's Thomas Massey, 4th District in Kentucky. Thomas, great to have you with us today.
Well, great to be with you, Ron, and I've got one of the best senators in the world in Kentucky. I'm speaking of your son. It's great to have him for a senator.
Well, you did a lot to help him in campaigning, but the big thing is you promote the cause of liberty, and that's what really counts, and that's why both Rand and myself were early supporters for you when you first ran for Congress. But we're just delighted to see your work in Congress today, and I think you're carrying the torch quite well. I would like you to start off with maybe giving us a little bit of an update. You gave us a bit of an update when you were at our convention, but there's been a few new things dealing with foreign policy in the Congress. Could you give us a couple hints on some of the votes you've had to cast, and did you have any difficult votes to cast?
Sure, there were 3 votes on foreign policy, which I know is in your monetary policy and foreign policy are sort of in your wheelhouse. And I'd like to think we voted how you would have voted, several of us in the Liberty Caucus, which is still alive and well. The first vote I want to tell you about was here, the warmongers were just dead set on rattling sabers at Russia. And so they wanted to issue some rebuke to Russia over Georgia. And so, there was some discussion. The bill was called, honoring the territorial integrity of Georgia or something like that. And I think some of the congressmen thought if we gave that to Georgia, South Carolina would want it next. But we reminded them that we were talking about foreign policy here. Anyways, so there were only 6 votes against that, against rattling our sabers at Russia. And myself, Justin Amash, Walter Jones, and Jimmy Duncan were 4 of the reliable votes. We also had Lamar Smith from your state in Texas and Dana Rohrabacher. That was one of our foreign policy votes. We had another vote, which they're always dead set on keeping everybody in Gitmo at Gitmo. And my position is much like Senator Paul's position, which is give them some kind of tribunal. You can't keep somebody indefinitely detained without charging them for something. And so give them a tribunal, some kind of trial, and then either let them go or convict them. But right now they're in this state where we're just going to be taking care of them forever, yet, keeping them in prison without a trial. So we had a vote where people in Congress wanted, assert their neoconism, and so they voted to make sure nobody gets out of Gitmo. Whether they're innocent or not, they're all going to stay in Gitmo. And so there were 4 of us that voted against that on the Republican side. There were some Democrats that voted, with us. But again, Jimmy Duncan, Walter Jones, Justin Amash, and myself. And finally, a vote that happened just last week. They wanted to give more foreign aid to Israel, particularly military aid. And, I've polled this issue in my district, and most of my constituents are not in favor of more foreign aid to any country. So again, you had 4 of us, Walter Jones, you're seeing a pattern here, Walter Jones, Jimmy Duncan, Justin Amash, and myself, who voted against sending more foreign aid over there.
Thomas, I wanted to bring up a subject along those lines that remind me about a vote you took. I believe you voted all by yourself. And you voted against subsidies for green energy to Israel, and you were the only one that voted against it. Do you recall if you got any grief from that? Some people are against subsidies, but they will still be willing to vote for that. Do you recall if you got any grief at all?
Oh, yeah, I got a lot of grief for that. Those are sort of, I mean, for me, they're gut-wrenching votes. For you, I think they got easy after a while. But I was the only no on that. And it had a wonderful title. That's the problem with these bills. You know, they run the articles back home to say, you voted against a bill calling Israel our best ally, you know, bill. Well, the bill had green energy subsidies. It called for grants for green energy subsidies. So you had conservatives who wouldn't even vote for that stuff here in the United States, but they're happy to give it in the form of foreign aid overseas. Yet because the name of the bill mentioned Israel, they were afraid to vote no, and I was the only no on that one.
Daniel?
Well, I want to thank you for joining us, Representative Massey. I also want to thank you again for speaking at the Ron Paul Institute's conference on the 10th of this month. It was such a great speech. And I want to thank you for joining our Board of Advisors. We're so happy to have you. It's a great thrill. So thanks very much for that. It's funny you've taken a couple of tough votes where you're the only no vote. And I remember the times back on the Hill when Dr. Paul did that. And it was always kind of funny because my colleague at the time, Jeff Deist, was the press secretary at the time. And inevitably, if he was the one no vote, the press would call like crazy. Why did you vote against it? Why did you vote against it? And Jeff always said, why don't you call the other guys and see why they voted for it?
Right. That's a better question.
But if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind backing up a bit, talk a little bit more about you. And I'm interested, and I think a lot of our viewers would be interested in your transition to embracing libertarian principles, how you got to start being attracted to these. You have such an illustrious career. You've got a degree from MIT. You're a successful entrepreneur. You built a multi-million-dollar business. You built a house with your own hands in Kentucky where you live off the grid. So how did you start getting interested in these principles? And if you don't mind telling us, what was the transition from this wonderful life in Kentucky to life in Washington like?
Well, I call the life in Kentucky, that's the Shire. And I'm, John McCain called us all hobbits, I think. But so the Shire is Kentucky and Mordor is Washington, D.C. So every Monday I put on my Precious and come to Washington, D.C. And it really is like Mordor. It's hard to say why any of us get into politics, but I can tell you when I figured out that the two parties, there was something wrong, that neither of the two parties represented me predictably or accurately, or even the intention of the people. And that was in 1993. There was an event that happened in Texas with the Branch Davidians. And what I saw on TV, they kept the media away from that. There was a standoff between the government and the Branch Davidians. Now, what's funny is, he was accused of polygamy, and now they've decided to sort of more or less legalize a redefinition of marriage. But the Republicans were upset at the Branch Davidians because they said maybe they were doing drugs or maybe they had illicit sexual relations, right? But the Democrats were mad at the Branch Davidians because they were religious and they liked guns, right? So, and what I saw on TV disturbed me is some people were rooting for the defeat of these Americans who were bothering nobody. Yet the government, once they sort of got into this standoff with the Branch Davidians, it was clear there was never going to be a good way out for them. The heavy boot of government was going to come down on these folks. And it's just sad. It's really sad to me what the eventual outcome was there. And I thought there's got to be a better way than to roll in and be so heavy-handed on people that are just minding their own business.
Okay. I know, Thomas, that you've done some work on the concern about NSA and surveillance. Why don't you give us an update on what's happening in Congress, if anything good, and, of course, in context of what's going on with the invasion of our privacy. I know systematically it's being attacked constantly, but we're delighted that you're at least involved in that and trying to slow it up a bit.
Yeah, well, I have some good news to report on this front. That is, this summer they tried to sneak through on a voice vote a suspension bill, which means there's no debate and it hasn't gone through the committee and it's not been marked up. But they brought a bill straight to the floor that would have expanded the Patriot Act. There's a clause in the Patriot Act that says that banks can send your financial information, regardless of the dollar amount. They could send it straight to the government if they suspect you of terrorism or money laundering. Well, what they sought to do was to take out the words terrorism and money laundering and replace it with any crime. So literally, if the bank suspected you of anything without a warrant, without the government requesting it, they could just stream your financial information to the government. And they brought this vote up. They tried to pass it by a voice vote. I got to give kudos to my friend Justin Amash, who went to the floor and demanded a recorded vote. And when we got the recorded vote, we were able to get enough people to respond to their congressman in just a few hours that the recorded vote failed. And so the Patriot Act was not expanded this summer. It could have easily happened were it not for Justin Amash and myself and a few others there.
Thomas, has the Congress taken any position or made any statement about Snowden and what they would like to see happen there?
You know, that's interesting you asked that question. I just rushed over from a classified setting where Justin Amash and I were together reading the classified report that Congress has prepared on Snowden. So they prepared this report in anticipation of the release of that movie. But the problem is so much of that is classified that they can't release. They're basically trying, in the report, I can't tell you what's in the report or any of the classified stuff, but they're basically trying to portray this picture of somebody who was a complainer and inept and that wasn't suitable for the job or whatever. But the reality is they kept promoting him and moving him forward. And the report, there's a lot of stuff to be suspect of in the report. I think they should publish it. Publish the report, the classified report, if it's that damaging to Snowden, and then let him respond. But the reality is this, Ron, they changed the Patriot Act last year because of the Snowden revelation. And the fact that they changed something they were doing is an admission that he revealed something that wasn't right. And, I mean, that's, at the end of the day, if we met in Congress and passed something and the president signed a bill, that's an admission that he did a service. Whether he did damage or not, he did a service to this country by revealing the way that our Constitution was being abused.
And that's a great point, Mr. Massey, and it's also shows that public opinion being changed by things like the revelations from Snowden is very powerful, and it affects politicians. And I remember while you were speaking at the conference, you talked about how when the march up to the Syrian war, the war drums were beating, and all of a sudden Capitol Hill started lighting up with phone calls, people calling their members saying, we don't want war. And I remember working for Dr. Paul, how a few phone calls will get your attention. And I was wondering if you might share with us how it works in your office, because I don't think people realize how much effect they can have on Washington.
You can have tremendous effect. I mean, that's the other good news I think we need to share with as many people as possible. Congress critters do respond to public pressure. The problem is it's usually the lobbyists, the military-industrial complex that has their attention once they're inside the Beltway. But you can break through that membrane with a phone call. I don't recommend writing letters. They just pile up. They're answered with form letters. But when you make a phone call, a live person on my staff has to answer that phone call. And I typically only get 5 to 7 phone calls a day out of 750,000 constituents. So on the Syrian issue in 2013, I started getting 100 phone calls a day for like 7 or 10 days in a row. And this was, you remember, President Obama said, oh, Assad's crossed the red line and we need to go to war. We need to go to war now. And I want Congress to approve it. And Speaker Boehner said, oh, yeah, we'll tee this up for you. And Nancy Pelosi said, we'll tee this up for you. But the reality is the phone calls started coming in. And when you get 700 phone calls against going to war and 1 for going to war, it's pretty clear you better start listening to your constituents. And I even went to members of Congress on the floor, like a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, which is traditionally against war. And I said, are you really going to vote for war if this comes to the floor? And he said, I'm not going to out him because he's a friend. And he said, there's no way I'm voting to go to war in Syria. I'm trying to be nice to my president, okay? And so I'm not going to say anything publicly, but if this comes to a vote, there's no way I'm voting for it. So what did they do? They pulled the bill from the floor. We never voted to go to war in Syria. It never happened. And it was solely because of the people that were making phone calls that we didn't have boots on the ground in 2013 to now. Now, there's a secret, funding of weapons and whatnot that's going there with dubious effect that, Obama sought to entertain through a classified budget, which Snowden has disclosed, right? And the Washington Post has reported on. But ultimately, those phone calls, I would say, saved thousands of American lives.
I think that's a great story, and it means that if the people wake up, they can have an effect. But we're dealing with, a powerful force when it comes to war propaganda, and it'll be back again constantly. There'll be something up soon, and who knows what happens when you're in a break and this sort of thing. But I did want to shift a little bit because I know you've had an interest in the drug war, the idiocy of that war, and of course I think we've made inroads on that. But you, in particular, have nibbled away on the fallacies dealing with industrial hemp. How does that stand right now?
Well, I got an amendment in 2013 on the Farm Bill that allowed industrial hemp to be grown in any state that made it legal. And this is rope, not dope. As you pointed out to me when I came into Congress, Ron, you could smoke a hemp joint the size of a telephone pole and it still wouldn't do anything for you. Maybe it'd give you a headache. I remember you telling me that on the floor of the House. So anyways, I picked up your bill, and it was important to Kentucky, and I pushed it, and we got an amendment on the Farm Bill. There's 1,000 acres of hemp growing in Kentucky today, and there's nobody passed out in the fields. There's nobody sneaking in, growing dope in the middle of it. Not a single person has gotten hurt from this, and what we've proven is not only is it not dangerous, but it grows great in Kentucky. And so the next step is to completely legalize it for industrial purposes. And we keep having votes on that every year, and it passes as an amendment to bills, but those bills never pass. I think if I could get your original industrial hemp bill to the floor, and by the way, the chairman of the committee now is talking to us about this. He's interested because he's from Virginia, and his farmers are growing it. And he's been to a hemp field now, so there's pictures of the chairman with industrial hemp all around him. And so he's actually supporting it now. I think if we get this to the floor, it's going to pass by a veto-proof majority. So that's going to be great because it's legal in every industrialized country in the world except for the United States, where only thanks to the Farm Bill can you grow it for research purposes. Well, so that's some great news.
That's good.
Meanwhile, speaking of the war on drugs, we had a hearing in the Oversight Committee where the Inspector General for Afghanistan and even the Deputy Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense for the region that includes Afghanistan, testified that we've spent $8 billion trying to eradicate poppy production, which is what opium and heroin ultimately come from. We spent $8 billion in Afghanistan, and I asked them both what the result was, and the result was they doubled production. So you only get 5 minutes in a hearing. So I talked to the Inspector General later, and I was like, could you just spray Roundup on that stuff? I mean, wouldn't that kill it? And he said, yeah. He said it would devastate it. And so I said, well, why aren't we doing that? And he said it would be far too effective. Like, in other words, it would actually work, and we're not really trying to eradicate the production over there because there's a tenuous relationship between the government we're propping up and the Taliban. And you would tick off the Taliban, you would disrupt the situation over there. So even though we're spending the money, we're not trying to do anything. So I offered an amendment this summer on the DoD appropriations bill to just quit wasting money in Afghanistan saying we're trying to eradicate poppy when we're not. And I thought I might get 3 or 4 votes, maybe 20. I got 63 votes. Now, It took 218 to pass, but that's pretty good news when 63 people realize this is just a waste of money.
Progress. Daniel, do you have anything else?
Well, on the similar note, you've done a lot with getting the U.S. out of the UN. You've done a lot of work that Dr. Paul used to do on the UN. Yeah. And it's important an issue when it comes to U.S. sovereignty. But one of the things that Dr. Paul noticed toward the later part of his terms there is that the neocons who had initially agreed with him about the UN, they fell in love with it. And it's because they started being able to control it. and now they love the UN because they feel like it's an extra tool in the toolbox of U.S. interventionist foreign policy.
Well, they feel like it's a tool. They also, the president would like to think it's a tool for getting his policies passed domestically and imposed on us that he can't get through Congress, right?
Yeah.
He would like more gun control. And so he feels like if he pushes, and Senator Kerry or Secretary Kerry has, already signed off on this. They feel like if they can get the UN to adopt it, then they can use the force of the UN to exert that over our sovereignty. And so, yeah, I've offered the same bill that Ron Paul offered to get us out of the UN. Now, I've called it a Mexit, to take a cue on the Brexit vote. And people realize it's the same sort of thing. I mean, it's not an exact analog, but the British, they were giving some of their sovereignty to a bigger organization. And we've done the same thing to a different degree at the UN. So I've offered the Mexit bill. And I'm actually a co-sponsor of that. There's another congressman that offered it, but it's picking up steam. I mean, people are starting to wake up, particularly when they're pushing gun control and some of this green energy policy and things like that. People don't want to give up our sovereignty. Another problem is, and I know you spoke about this, is the World Trade Organization. Last year in the omnibus, we just removed our country of origin labeling from beef and pork because the World Trade Organization told us to. And that's pretty scary. Regardless of how you feel about that issue, whether we should have to label stuff from other countries, I think it's dangerous when other countries tell us what we can and can't label on our own food.
Yeah, there you go. We have to finish up here shortly, but I do want to ask you one more brief question, and that is, have you received any punishment from the leadership? I know when I was leaving Congress, several of our allies were actually punished and taken off the committee. Is that going on now, or is that all history?
I was a subcommittee chair, and I don't want to talk about which committee and say which chairman it was, because I still like the chairman. But after I voted against Boehner and took some of these brave votes, they came to me and said, we're not going to kick you off the committee. We're going to dissolve the committee, and somebody else is going to be chair of the other committee we're merging it with. So it was very creative.
Exactly.
We had to reprint our stationery. We didn't issue new press releases that they had dissolved my subcommittee. But I'm convinced if you want to get rid of some of these useless subcommittees, just make me chairman, and then they'll shortly dissolve the subcommittee. They later, 2 years later, came to me and said, we'd like to offer you another subcommittee chairmanship on the committee we merged yours with. And I said, wait, I've seen this movie before. And by the way, in 4 weeks, I'm voting against John Boehner, and you're going to do the same thing to me that you did 2 years ago. So go give somebody else that position, and we'll save you and me the embarrassment of being removed from that position, because they're usually decorative anyway. Right. I mean, it's just something to do a press release on, and the subcommittee chairs are told what to do by the chairman, and for the most part, the chairman are told what to do by the speaker. Mm-hmm. So if there were anybody like me that were truly independent to become a chairman, it would be a miracle.
Right. Thomas, I want to thank you very much for being with us today. This is a great program, and I hope we can get you back on another day.
I'll come back anytime you want, and thanks for leaving us with a great legacy here, Dr. Paul.
Thank you. And I want to thank our audience today for joining us here at Liberty Report.
Ron Paul Liberty Report. Go to YouTube, Ron Paul Liberty Report, subscribe, and you can also go to ronpaullibertyreport.com and check out other clips and articles. Go there. I do kind of want to get to this article if I can. Okay. This was out of Reason by Nick Gillespie. It's actually a clip, but it was Richard Epstein and why Obamacare is collapsing. And then he also goes into why he's not voting for Trump, Hillary, or Johnson. Says here the architects of Obamacare could have foreseen today's crisis, says New York University law professor Richard Epstein, except they were intellectual super jocks with a superior Ivy League sneer, who knew so much better than anyone else how to run this Rube Goldberg contraption designed to defeat the law of gravity. Epstein speaks as an insider to elite circles. A graduate of Columbia, Oxford, and Yale Law School, he's the Lawrence A. Tisch Professor of Law at New York University, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, and a professor emeritus at the University of Chicago. A towering figure in his field, Epstein has had profound impact on libertarian legal theory, especially with his 1985 book, Takings, Private Property and the Power of Eminent Domain. Throughout his career, Epstein says he's been surrounded by people cleverer than myself, putting up schemes that are dumber than you can imagine. Reasons Nick Gillespie sat down with Epstein for an extended discussion about the collapse of the Obamacare exchanges, why cigarette companies don't owe smokers a dime, the recent legal campaign against ExxonMobil related to global warming, Obama's dismissal record where the U.S. went wrong in Iraq, why he thinks Gary Johnson is a weak candidate, Hillary Clinton criminal offenses, whether he favors Hillary or Trump, and why he's planning to sit out this election. And, you know, that kind of goes back to why I'm saying your local elections are going to be the big thing. And you can watch that interview at reason.com. It's on the left-hand side right now under must reads. So it's really a must watch and listen. Now, I was talking earlier about if you live in a city, getting a mayor. Well, you know, cities are very, very corrupt. I've learned this very early on, that hence why I don't live in the city. They're very, very corrupt. And it's amazing that when you're more rural, you tend to know more people than when you're packed in the city and you can't trust anyone. You really seem to have that, you know, kind of it's a puzzling thing. More people closer by, you think you would have to rely on each other and trust each other more, but it seems that culture is actually more rural, and it's just baffling to me how, you know, things aren't what you would think them to be. And that again goes to why a lot of this stuff can't be planned in the economy, and same with Obamacare and healthcare, because you just can't predict these things. The Federal Reserve can't predict what interest rates are supposed to be. The free market has to do that, and there's going to be downs and ups. But those will be natural downs and ups, not, you know, controlled bubbles, created bubbles. But I want to get to this article, another one out of reason.com that I came across, and it had to do with the corruption in the cities, why I think more people really need to stop with the Republican Democrat and really look at someone that's saying individual freedoms, because individual freedoms mean your freedom, their freedom, everyone's freedom, everyone as an equal, a true equal. says here, cities embrace surveillance state. Little brother is watching. On Tuesday, Anaheim became the latest in a growing list of California cities to install police monitor cameras in public places. In this case, 3 public parks. The impetus 2 years ago, a 9-year-old girl was tragically shot to death near Brookhurst Community Park after getting caught in the crossfire between rival gangs. Locals understandably want safer parks. The register's accounts of votes of the vote quotes critics who referred to George Orwell's 1984 about a dystopian future where Big Brother is watching you. That's a legitimate fear as cities embrace cameras virtually everywhere. Some localities, such as San Diego County, employ facial recognition software to identify crime suspects, which is even creepier than anything in the famous novel. Big Brother, some big, all-knowing leader, might not be watching us, but little brothers and sisters, police officials, as they sip coffee in some headquarters monitoring room, certainly are watching. How free can we be if we're constantly under surveillance? Another quotation jumps to mind. I can't pronounce it, but it's Latin from poet Juvenal, who will guard the guards themselves. The biggest problem with these systems, experts studying how the camera systems in Britain are operated have also found that the mostly male and probably bored operators frequently use the cameras to voyeuristically spy on women. According to American Civil Liberties Union analysis of nationwide public video surveillance, there's little oversight on how the cameras and databases are used, although Anaheim has sought input from civil libertarian groups. Law enforcement scandals are disturbingly common. The Orange County District Attorney's Office is dealing with a snitch scandal. The Santa Ana Police Department received bad publicity recently from the state's auditor for improperly entering people into its gang database. The Sheriff's Department has had black eyes too, including a past sheriff sent to prison. Then there was the release of a shocking report in 2007 about the department's handling of a jailhouse beating death. These are not related to videos per se, but a reminder of that Latin quotation, if the public needs to be monitored, who monitors the monitors? And who monitors the monitors overseeing the monitors? That later question is not rhetorical flourish. The aforementioned report revealed disturbing facts about the people in charge of overseeing the police. That's not to dismiss all uses of cameras. Body cameras worn by patrol officers have been amazingly effective at cutting down on abusive behavior, but police and by the people with whom they interact, cameras have ensnared cops whose stories don't jibe with the facts, and they've also exonerated cops facing false accusations. These cameras, however, are a far cry from the general monitoring of our public places. They involve the specific monitoring of interactions between police and the public. In those cases, it's entirely appropriate for the incidents to be caught on camera. Of course, surveillance cameras have helped catch criminals. We are used to being on camera when we go into privately owned public venues, such as stores, hotels, bars, and concert halls. So it's not an entirely clear-cut situation. Anaheim Mayor Tom Tate, also concerned about a slippery slope toward excessive public monitoring, reminded me that some of the city's parks are out of control. He pointed at the Hawthorne effect, where people behave differently when they know they are being monitored. There's little expectation for privacy in a city park. I'm not sure about Anaheim's parks, but the ones near me are hotbeds for crime, homelessness, public um, defecation, and drug use. But where does it end? The city council was also open to a future phase integrating into one monitoring network existing cameras at traffic lights, City Hall, Angel Stadium, and other city owned facilities, according to the newspaper. How long before we're always on camera every time we leave the house? I think we're already getting there. You can read the rest of that article at reason.com. The police state is already here. We whether a lot of people know it, they already are using these. Of course, the bigger cities have bigger networks, and the smaller cities are falling in line again. Why I basically run from the city. Not saying I don't go to the city, I just choose not to live there. Um, and I go to multiple cities because where I live, I'm about the same distance from multiple cities. I can cover 6 counties in a day and actually get stuff accomplished. It's pretty interesting. Um, where it was funny, when I lived in the city, it took you so long to get through all the traffic lights, all the standing traffic, a lot of it due to most of the traffic lights. Places where I used to live, areas that were stop signs or no stop, are now roundabouts or traffic lights, and traffic don't flow anymore. It doesn't flow at all. So it's one of those things that when I go back there, I just see so much of the change, and I see how much people are stressed and not getting things accomplished. And it's funny because I'll bounce around the outskirts of the city, so I'm not burning up too much time, and I can get a lot done. But you have to know the back roads and the rural areas, and just shoot around the edge of the city and miss all the traffic. But I think a lot of this could be fixed when you fix the corruption within the city. Um, a lot of what I see is favors being done. I mean, I've seen the same road fixed every other year for 6 years. 6 years, 3 times fixed, and you're looking at all these other roads that are falling apart, and you're like, now how does this road, when it gets a little bit worn out, constantly get fixed, but all these other roads are falling apart? And then sidewalks are falling apart within the city. Now, when you're outside the city, you didn't have sidewalks running through your yard, and then when you move in the city, they decided, hey, you're getting this. Then when it's falling apart, what I've seen the city do is go, we're going to make you a great deal. If you pay $500, we'll chip in the rest of the money and get that sidewalk fixed in front of your house. What? Excuse me? You put the sidewalk there. You didn't keep up maintenance on it. Now it looks like a mountain bike course, and I gotta pay to fix it. Oh, I'm so glad I moved out. I'm trying to pull something up here. Give me a second. A few I wanted to cover, but I'll probably get to one of these. Okay. Now, I forgot I had to bring this up on our one, but I'm pulling it up right now. Sorry about that. Now, I kind of want to get into the economy, and I have multiple people talking about this right now. It's one of those things that it's going to be a major thing heading up, probably within. I see it coming by the end of this year. Now, I've also heard chatter about it possibly happening in January. But I think all this is talk, but there is something in our economy that something's happening. There's a couple clips that AMTV put out. I'm going to cover one, just signs of economic collapse coming. He's also got another one prepared for economic collapse 2017. Has some interesting discussion in there about that. But I'm going to cover this one, then I'll cover a little bit of what We Are Change talked about too. So let's go ahead and get into the AMTV one. Christopher Green first.
Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV, alternative media television, hard-hitting and in your face. Thank you for your tremendous support. Subscribe if you haven't already. On demand, start your free 14-day trial, $4.95 a month, $49.95 a year. Vote with your wallets. Support us independently. Alternatively, I wanted to get into just such an uplifting story today. You know, there has been such a fantastic recovery post the 2008-2009 engineered transfer of wealth, the trillions of dollars stolen from you literally by the barrel of a gun because people like George Bush said that the world was going to come to an end. Yeah, that's right. The world was going to come to an end if we didn't bail out the bankers, the banksters. People like Lloyd Blankfein, Goldman Sachs, John Thain, former executive at Merrill Lynch, Jamie Dimon, Chase Bank, the Wells Fargo CEO, which is engaged in his own scandal right now, strong-arming, opening up fake accounts to create millions of dollars of wealth for his own pockets and screw over the little people. But things are so great. And this gravy train that makes up Janet Hoare Yellen at the printing presses, just opening her legs wide and just ushering out all that quantitative easing into all of our faces, just beautiful. 0% interest rates. Things are so great. And people are doing so well with their minimum credit card payments and inflated prices creating these new bubbles in housing, rents, and home ownership and these kinds of things, and food prices, steak, milk, food, eggs. We see this in the stock market too with an inflated bubble as these companies buy back all their own shares and the hedge funds rig it up on 20-to-1 leverage. All this kind of souping up for the world's elite. It's so strong and it's such a great recovery that not only are they considering negative interest rates, because 0% interest rates aren't good enough, I just wanted to highlight a story, which again just only proves how good things are going, that there are more and more people now living in a van down by the river. You probably remember, what was it? It's escaping me. Fat guy, come on, help me out here. Chris Farley, right? You're going to live in a van down by the river. Literally, in America. It's such a strong recovery. You heard it from Chris Farley first. God rest his soul. R.I.P., fat man. You're going to be living in a van down by the river. As people literally are in places in our coastal elitist cities where the super elite, meet with friends over cocktails and talk about Black Lives Matter. Like, oh, God. Oh, it's a good thing we have a safe room in our apartment. Talk about politics. Things are so good that people are ditching their apartments because they can't afford it because of zero interest rate policy, now going to NERP, negative interest rates, and the hookering of Janet Hoare-Yellen and people like her predecessors, Helicopter Ben Bernanke, and people like Alan Greenspan, even, who blew the first housing bubble, which, again, engineered the transfer of wealth so that they could bail out the billionaires. People are just ditching. Things are so good. People are ditching their apartments to live what they call, and they're kind of being hopeful about this, what they call the van life. Yeah, it's now popular to be living in a van down by the river, just like Chris Farley had warned us that you'd be living in a van down by the river. You take a look at these pictures. One guy decides to live in a van. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this at all, by the way. In fact, there's extremely talented, successful people throughout history. A lot of them started homeless. I mean, really, because that's what it takes to build things and creative ideas. So I know a lot of people that's where they started. Actually, probably the person that's most famous, love him or hate him, is Glenn Beck. That guy was homeless before he built the Blaze. Love or hate the guy was homeless. There's a lot of people like that because that's what it takes to take risks and to build things. Most people aren't willing to make that kind of sacrifice. So there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with off-grid living in these kinds of things. But what the story highlights is how expensive things have become and such a massive redistribution of engineered wealth that all we have now in American society is the super elite up here, sitting with their tea and crumpets along the elitist coastal cities in the New York area or, Silicon Valley, talking about politics. The top 0.0000001%, courtesy of zero interest rates and soon to be negative hookering interest rates. And everybody else at the bottom rung just sticking here eating dirt at the bottom. Almost like a Shakespeare play where they're just throwing the breadcrumbs down to the groundlings. There is no middle class in America anymore because of these criminals, because of the media, because of the government, because of these elitists sitting in their room with their tea and crumpets, financing through their foundations and this kind of thing, this kind of world. Again, this is what quantitative easing, folks, 0% interest rate and all these things help. It only helped the super elite. It destroys everybody else for a reason. Transfer all the wealth before the reset button. Transfer all the wealth before an escalation of global war. Take out the little people, evaporate the middle class, make them dependent on the government and the new socialist police state, while the super elite confiscate everything and get away with it, as was the case in 2008 and 2009, with not a single criminal going to jail. People like MF Global head John Corzine, who took money out of his own client customer accounts, but because he financed a large portion of Barack Obama's campaign, sails off into the sunset. So you've got people living in vans down by the river. It's popular now. Recent graduate of the University of Southern California. Isn't that great? You graduate from USC and you live in a van down by the river. Another gentleman, entrepreneur, awesome what you're doing, dude, living in a van down by the river. He's got on his van, says never stress. But these people are not alone, folks. Last year, 4,600 cars and RVs were used as homes, according to the Los Angeles Times. LA, Los Angeles County, like many cities, has a housing shortage. This, coupled with 3.1% vacancy rate, makes affordable living in LA an oxymoron. You look at Los Angeles, you look at places like Beverly Hills, for example, but you even get out of there, you look at, Silicon Valley, even places like New Zealand, where a lot of the hedge fund elite have been moving. You can't buy anything, a dump, for less than $1 million next to the freeway. That is a fixer-upper, by the way. Stratification of wealth, engineered redistribution of wealth for a reason, eradication of the middle class, So everybody's a groundling and a peasant, the sheeple, the sheep, the flock. So it's dependent, and they are dependent, and we are all dependent on this new, whatever this shit show is that makes up America today. Happens and is happening for a reason. Someone says, minimizing my bills can essentially allow me to work less hours. And then they see all the, they talk about the problems and the strife that they're going through, $1,000 in parking tickets. There's a picture of a young lady. She's, sitting in some kind of van or RV. She's kind of looking out the window. I mean, this is what the millennial generation has to look forward to. Engineered house prices, engineered stock prices, engineered, more importantly, educational prices, like this lad who graduated USC and lives in a van down by the river, just like Chris Farley warned about, because there is no options. But the super elite are making all the money. In fact, they're rigging tuition prices even higher through student loans, which, by the way, you can't default on. You can default on everything else. The too big to fail banks can default on whatever they want and get bailed out, but not you, young children that, are trying to get, an education. All this fueled by cheap money, cheap debt, 0% interest rates, and engineered for a reason to keep you paying into the system and dependent on the system for the rest of your lives. Why do you think people have so much trouble getting out of credit card debt? It's engineered that way. Why do you think you need a mortgage and you can't pay cash? It's engineered that way. Why do you think in order to buy a new car, a lot of these new cars cost $50,000, and you've got to take out a 5, 6, and now 7-year loan? Because it's engineered that way for a reason. Again, create money out of thin air from the criminal Federal Reserve, give it to the banksters, the hedge funds, Ponzi up the market, they cash out. It's the very definition of a Ponzi right before the next collapse, which is exactly what they did in 2008 and 2009. And don't tell me it's not happening again, because it is. Here's the evidence of Barack Obama's recovery, of Janet Hoare Yellen's recovery, even tiny houses. And again, these are cool strategies of independent living, but it's a byproduct of the sheer fact that the younger generation, and even the older generation, they've been eradicated out of the middle class. They can't buy a home. So what do? Well, tiny homes. Let's make it fashionable. Let's make it cool. It's all a byproduct of this stratification and engineered redistribution of wealth. And again, there's intent behind it. So what we have now are the terrifying signs of a looming housing crisis, a stock market bubble, a bubble in food prices, all these things. The only thing that isn't a bubble probably right now, but was a bubble, which collapsed, which only shows you what a collapse looks like and how engineered some of these things are, is oil. Everything else, Ponzi'd up to the stratosphere. It's one big party. And instead of, it's 1929 all over again, the roaring 20s, baby. And instead of hiking interest rates and normalizing and allowing peak to trough to peak to valley and allowing a free market capitalist system to exist here in the United States, they're only fueling the fire. Terrifying signs of a looming crisis. Terrifying signs of economic collapse. But on a positive flip side, they're selling $43 martinis at a San Francisco bar. This is, again, what the New World Order elite are sipping as they talk about politics. They're bottling fog now for $43 a martini. There's a common misconception, these lies, these untruths that are sold to the educational and public school system, which is really just a slave ship, really just jail. Untruths like, hey, to make more money, you've got to work harder. Here's a very specific example. Do you think any of these New World Order elite are working any harder? No, they're not. They don't have to do anything to make more money. The whole system's engineered in their favor. In fact, they can sit and sip fog martinis at $50 a pop and make more money while they're talking about you, the lower rung and the lower class. The deplorables, as Hillary Clinton tells you. Again, all these untruths, well, you've got to work hard, to make more. Like, no, you don't. See, the globalist elite are all about productivity. Less work. Again, they're focused on living the lifestyle and transferring that money from generation to generation. The super elite, while at the same time crushing you, your family, and friends, and eradicating the middle class through social engineering and brainwashing. Kind of appalling, isn't it? I mean, could you imagine you're just at a bar and they're like,
Good day, sir. We've got a wonderful selection on the menu today. A fog martini is just,
and they're like, oh, guys like wearing a monocle, and a cane.
Yeah, give me one of those, kind sir. Yeah, please, I'll take a fog martini. Have you heard about those Black Lives Matter movement? They're so irritating.
Capping a great show, guys. Thank you so much. Your tremendous support. All of you make what we do worth it.
Christopher Green on YouTube, AMTV on YouTube. Christopher Green. Go check him out. Subscribe. Now, I've been talking about a lot of these signs. Housing prices going up when nothing else is going up, when people most people that lost jobs, the majority of them that have found jobs, there's probably half of those that they're not anywhere close to what they were making. Other ones might be close, maybe making it, but I would say probably about half of them, you're not seeing the same wages. I know a lot of people that have taken pay cuts, and we also watch the stock market not follow the true economy. I'm kind of like housing prices really didn't either. The Fed's messing with the interest rates, and I talked about them not raising the interest rates, how that was bad. The longer they do it, the more harm it creates. And even though doing it will create harm too, what you'll also see now that they raised interest rates a little bit, created this false narrative that, oh, finally they're raising them, that yeah, it's going to hurt a little bit, but we see a better outcome in the future because they raised it a little bit. Again, the true economy is still where it was. Nothing truly is happening. So now we got people basically wagering on the future because, well, they already raised interest rates a little bit. They'll raise it some more, and we'll be back to normal. But now what we're seeing is, well, interest rates are probably not going to go up. They're probably going to go back down again. They're saying, hey, we're still not good, or they'll stay exactly where they're at for a couple years if we can make it that long. Because if this bubble pops, which it will, and we haven't at least got the economy up to a place where it can take another blow, we're not looking at the greatest future coming up. So I think it's really important that we try to get people definitely into Congress and local governments that will make it easier for people to start small businesses. Make it easier, not only in the sense of less permitting and, all this, the permits that you do have to eventually get. Make it well and easily understandable to the majority of the people. Hey, just come down here, file for this, have this, and this ready, and you can apply for a permit to open up a retail shop on, the block or whatever. Make it easier, make it understandable, and get the economy going. I think if you can do that, I think we can put ourselves in a better position as a country and as a community for the coming future, because there is a bubble. It'll keep getting bigger. Even if our economy gets better, it's already inflated. So it's always going to be that much inflated over what we really are. And it will have to pop. And I can almost bet that you'll see other things come out of the Fed that will help inflate it even more if the economy gets better. False hope. And then, like Christopher Green was talking about, bam, they get richer and you get poorer. And, he talked about, the lower class, middle class, the upper class. I always said there's four groups. We always get this confused. And they get us confused on purpose because they want the lower class and the middle class to look at the wealthy and rich people as the elite. When these people aren't the elite. That's where the fourth class. I talk about the super rich, the actual elite. And what they have been doing, though, what we've considered the middle class, which I always considered the lower class or the lower upper class. They split the middle class up. And they did allow a pretty decent number to go to that upper class. Then the rest of them went to that lower class. Now you truly have three classes. Your lower class, your upper class, and your super rich or elite. Now your upper class is actually middle class. When you look at people that make 100 families, 200,000 a year, 300,000, that's middle class. If you're not making, I would say if you're not making per person at least 80,000, you fall into the lower class. You're not middle class. Because if you look at the wealth and the riches of the super elite or the elite, the super rich, 100,000 a year, 200,000, 300, 500,000 a year is chump change to them. That's your middle class. The people, there's already upper class people that are reaching elite status because they're bringing in millions and millions of dollars a day. They make hundreds of thousands an hour. And a lot of them are hardworking. They do multiple things. They're doing entertainment here, endorsing this over here, doing talk show over here, doing this over there, running over here to do that. Some of them are actually hardworking. But you have the old elite the top of the elite chain. They don't do anything. When Christopher Green was talking about the system set up where they just sit back and collect, those are the people sitting back and collecting. And a lot of the listeners already know the families and the names that I'm talking about. If you see them going to do jobs, they're doing it for fun. They're bored. They want to be public and controversial. Usually children from the family that grow up to seek attention. I kind of got a little off topic, but not completely. But I do want to get onto this We Are Change, covering the economy of the U.S. economic storm that will crash the global economy. I can't remember if I covered this one already, but I do want to cover it again, if not first time. So we'll go ahead and cue this up here. We Are Change. We Are Change on YouTube. wearechange.org. Check them out. Subscribe on YouTube. We Are Change tends to put out a lot shorter clips and great for catching up on things. I do know we did cover this one already once. Don't know what's happening here. I didn't think I covered that one. Let me see if I have the right one. Maybe I've seen that on something else. It was just titled the same. I'm not sure where that went, but we'll go ahead and get on to the article. I had a few of them over here bookmarked. Okay. Get this to pop up here. Maybe. If I don't run into all kinds of issues here. Why I usually don't run two machines to play clips, but since we've been having so many issues, it's a lot easier this way. I wanted to cover this. It kind of falls under kind of history. And, our industries have been just devastated, our manufacturing sectors. And there's been a lot of innovation made here in America. But again, it's manufactured overseas and then tends to easily be copied overseas, and you get these very second-rate things that end up flooding the market because they make them cheap and fast, and um, it doesn't cost them anything to make them. But this from Jeffrey Tucker out of um, FEE.org, Foundation for Economic Education. Top 5 obsolete names for once innovative products. It says, as we know from The Graduate, plastics were a big deal in the 20th century. There was always some new product that was said to be vastly better than the thing it would replace. And it probably was. But it didn't last. All we are left with are some funny words we don't use anymore. And why? Because the next thing came along and buried the old thing in the cultural landfill of words that came and went. And this one, I know a lot of people will still know it because maybe their grandparents or someone use it to describe something that it is not anymore. A lot of times plastic wrap, you'll hear grandparents still call it this, even though that's not what plastic wrap is. Cellophane. The 1934 song You're the Top by Cole Porter offers the following compliment. You're the National Gallery, your carbo salary, your cellophane. It sounds mystifying to modern ears. If someone called you plastic wrap, you wouldn't be entirely happy. But in 1934, cellophane was indeed amazing. It was a brilliant way of sealing anything with a lid, but a lid that adapted according to need. Nothing like this appeared in nature. So its very existence was a tribute to ingenuity. It was invented by Jacques E. Bradenberger in 1900 and perfected to the point that it was used for restaurant tablecloths by the 1920s. No more washing cloths to get rid of stains, just a wipe with a cloth and it was clean for the next customer. Then candy makers figured out that they could use it to wrap up chocolates and preserve the freshness. How otherwise would you do this but for cellophane? This was marvelous then, but just taken for granted today. Naga hide. What if you could have the look and feel of leather without the high price that comes with getting the real thing? After all, humans had used animal skin since the dawn of time itself, but in the modern age, with flight and telephones and electricity, surely there should be another way. Noghide came of age in 1936, an innovation of the United States Rubber Company. It later became a hugely popular covering for furniture. The look and feel of leather without the fuss or expense. A later advertising campaign invented the fake animal, the naga, which was used to shed its skin and grow more without losing its life. In truth, this stuff is pretty awful to our eyes today, and no homeowner would today brag about having Naugahyde furniture But look more carefully and you see fake leather everywhere, purses, headboards, shoes, and yes, chairs. It is part of a way of life. In fact, fake leather recently gained a new life under a greeny pitch. It's not plastic but vegan leather. The word Nagahide lives mostly in our memories, but the reality is all around us. Formica, stone countertop, or formica. Um, Stone countertops, the real deal, are usually fashionable in the best homes. This was not always the case. Countertops were usually wood in the past until a fabulous new thing came along. And it was the thing that everyone wanted, Formica. It was invented by two Westinghouse employees in 1912, and they were so impressed by what they had done, they spun off on their own. By the 1950s, everyone wanted a fancy new Formica countertop, so modern, indestructible, and maintenance free. But then a strange thing happened. The company to which the inventors sold the rights became obsessed with the intellectual property. They swore then the great name Formica would never become a moniker of just any plastic countertop. They defended their patents and trademarks with flurries of lawsuits, but instead of making money, Formica was displaced by 1,000 alternatives until Formica itself became a kind of a joke. But look at the desktop where you are working right now. Chances are that it is some version of Formica. Things like marble and granite, those are for the fanciest kitchens, where going back to the Stone Age has a special catch. And oh, you'll love this one. Betamax! Sony developed Betamax in 1975 as the most awesome thing anyone could imagine. You could record something off the TV or even buy a movie and play it on your TV. It changed everything. We were once passive recipients of whatever was on the tube. Now we gained a measure of control, and it was awesome. A revelation. However, Sony made a mistake. It was so convinced of the superiority of its technology that it tried alone to dictate an industry standard. JVC took a different direction, innovating an alternative called VHS, and was liberal in its licensing. That meant, for example, that consumers could record from a camera on the same tape it could play on the television. Young readers are right now astonished that this was ever not possible. Superior or not, Betamax lost massive market shares, but just to indicate how important it was, consider this: only in 2016 did Betamax stop production completely. But guess what? You can't even give away your VHS either. Linoleum. It astonishes me to discover that linoleum was invented in 1855, thus making it one of the earliest and newfangled surfaces that came to domestic environments. Or perhaps it makes sense. What are you going to use to make a hard surface in your home? Concrete is somehow unappealing. Wood was tricky and expensive. Linoleum was awesome. You could clean it, you could print on it. It deterred spills and stains. It was softer than the alternatives such as stone or wood, so that every glass that fell on the floor did not necessarily shatter into a million pieces. Over time, nearly every kitchen floor in the Western world was made of linoleum. The inventor Frederick Walton tried but failed to protect his trademark and patent, and so his invention became the first product in recorded history to move from proprietary product to generic name for that product. Now every soft plastic or rubber floor is called linoleum, or can be. My sense is that we don't use the word much at all, but consider just how long a life it had, and consider how much social good this product caused to exist. And today, right, all the good homes use stone, very fancy stone. It's such a luxury that we can do without yesteryear's inventions. Let's not fail to give them all credit for including the great swath of the middle class in the grand project of upgrading our standards of living. And think about it. Before, you couldn't watch shows if you had to work. You couldn't, who was doing that? The wealthy people that didn't have to go into work. The people that could just, oh, I want to go golfing, or oh, my show's on, I want to stay home and watch my show. The wealthy people. And Betamax and VHS came into existence and made it where you could program it to record your show. That was something just amazing for people to be able to record their show. Like, oh my, I can actually record a show. I don't have to be here to watch it. Think of living in a time when you couldn't do that. And then all of a sudden you can. Kind of like when smartphones came out. Remember the first, cell phones that just, the old school Nokias that just blew up, where, the first college kids were finally able to get a cell phone. And their parents had cell phones, and they were these Nokia ones, and crazy amount of faces you could put on them, and buttons and antennas. But that was it. You had Snake chase these square blocks around the screen. And then smartphone. It's almost like we've actually seen technology start to, in a way, slow down. At least in our everyday lives. Think of how fast we went from green screen apples to the Mac to now you can have more power than those could ever even possibly be dreamt of back then in a smartphone. And even though we are seeing these inventions that they're looking at, they're trying to come up with, we're also seeing a lot of it kind of slow down, and I think I understand why, though. Because now people are starting to worry about their security, their privacy, their safety. I know plenty of people now that they look at these new smartphones or smart TVs, and they're like, I'll just stick with the basic non-smart TV. I want a non-smart TV. And they're trying to stick with that as long as possible. But they're like, I had one guy ask me, he said, I haven't been able to find a 4K TV that's not a smart TV. Is there a 4K TV? I'm like, I don't know. And I kind of started looking, and I think there were one or two that were made early on when the 4Ks first started popping up. A couple of them that were possibly made without the smart TV options. Basically good 4K resolution, but that was it. And now they're all smart TVs. If you want a 4K TV, it's a smart TV. And now, I've been talking to other people, and they said, no, all the TVs are going to be smart TVs. They're going to stop making them not smart TVs. Think about that. TV goes out. You need a new one. You're not going to have an option of opting out of a smart TV. These are the same TVs that many experts and even some of the producers, like I think it was Samsung, have come out and said, don't talk or do anything in front of your smart TV. Now, I have had people tell me, there's firewalls, things you can do to keep it disconnected from the internet. But eventually, well, if you know that everybody has a smart TV, even if they disable their router for wireless connection, go in their router connection and disable the wireless part. If someone wanted to hack in that system and turn that on, and then hack into your Wi-Fi signal out of your TV, or they might even be able to drive by and hack into your TV because of its wireless abilities. We already know what they do with stingrays, the government, these local police forces using stingray, federal forces having stingray equipment. We know the technology that they're garnering. We have to be very aware of the technology that we possess. And in the world that we're living in, if you're trying to keep up in the modern world, meaning you're not kind of staying back in technology terms. You're current, you're up and, you're somewhat trendy, but you're not, one of the trendies. But you're modern. You work in the modern world. You live a modern world lifestyle. It's going to be really, really hard to stay away from any of that. A lot of people use their smartphones for their personal and business. I have to pay my bills using my smartphone. I have to do a lot of my work on my smartphone, my connections, and when I get home, I want to just turn my TV on and hit Netflix. I don't have to turn my TV on and power up another device, and well, eventually TVs are all going to be smart TVs. So now you won't be like, well, I need no, you won't need an external box, just like you don't need an external box for the digital signal. Remember when they started first going digital? Not everybody had a flat screen and a modern TV. Might be somewhat modern, but it didn't have the digital setup in it. So you had to get the box. And they go, well, we'll give you coupons for free boxes. But you had to get that box. Now, most people don't have a box because they have a modern TV. It's built in. Then what happened? Oh, these boxes started coming out where you could go to YouTube and, Netflix and all these other streaming services. Now they're put it in the TVs. Now it will become standard in TVs. Remember when laptops came out? And then webcams came out. You had to buy the webcam, plug it into your computer, and then they started going, hey, we'll put the webcam in the computer. So then you could buy the more expensive laptop and get the webcam already in the computer. Then it became standard. Now it's standard in tablets. Now it's standard in cell phones. You know, I think I'm probably giving away something that could make quite a bit of money. A company that would actually come out and put out like a off-grid series. Call it the off-grid series line or whatever. A technology company that would put out a computer without a built-in microphone, built-in camera. Put out a cell phone without a built-in camera. Something that can be a smartphone but just not do the camera things. Maybe have a little plug-in camera that plugs into the little port where you would charge it. I remember one of the first camera phones that came out that I grabbed up. I wanted to test this out. I wanted to see if it was a Sony Ericsson cell phone. And it had a clip-on camera. This big old camera, well, it was probably an inch by inch and maybe about a third of an inch thick. That snapped onto the bottom of that Sony Ericsson phone. Now, technology, you could have like almost like a thumb drive type deal that just plugs in and has a little camera.
On the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on